I never believed in monsters. Not the kind whispered about around campfires. Not the creatures that supposedly lurked beyond the edge of civilization. I was a practical man. A wilderness guide who trusted maps, weather forecasts, and cold hard facts. That belief died somewhere in the Arctic. My name is Ryan Mercer, and this is the story of the thing I saw out there. The thing that nearly killed me. The thing that still appears in my nightmares. It began during the expedition across a remote stretch of Arctic wilderness. My two friends Ethan and Mark and I had spent months planning the journey. We intended to hike nearly 80 miles across a frozen region untouched by roads or settlements. The landscape was breathtaking. Towering glaciers shimmered beneath a pale winter sun. Endless fields of snow stretched toward the horizon. The silence was so complete that sometimes I could hear my own heartbeat beneath the layers of clothing. For 4 days, everything went according to plan. On the 5th day, we found the tracks. Mark spotted them first. "What made these?" he asked. We gathered around a series of enormous footprints pressed deep into the snow. Each print looked almost human. Almost. They were far too large, nearly 20 inches long. The spacing between them suggested a creature with an impossibly long stride. Ethan laughed nervously. Maybe a giant snowshoe enthusiast. None of us laughed with him. Something about those tracks made my stomach tighten. They continued northward across a frozen ridge before disappearing into drifting snow. We should have turned around. Instead, curiosity pushed us onward. That decision nearly cost our lives. The next afternoon, we climbed a steep rise overlooking a vast frozen valley. The wind howled around us. Then we heard another sound, a roar. Not a bear's roar, something deeper, something primal. The sounds echoed through the valley like thunder. We rushed toward the ridge and looked down. At first, I couldn't understand what I was seeing. A massive polar bear stood in the center of the valley. It was enormous, the largest polar bear I had ever seen. Blood stained its white fur. Then the other creature rose from behind an ice formation. My heart nearly stopped. It stood at least 10 feet tall. Its body was covered in shaggy white-gray fur. Its shoulders were broad enough to make the polar bear seem small. Long muscular arms hung at its side. Its face looked vaguely human, yet utterly monstrous. Dark eyes reflected the pale sunlight. The Yeti. I know how insane that sounds. There is no other name for what I saw. The creature let out a deafening roar. The polar bear charged. The collision shook the valley. The bear slammed into the creature with incredible force. The Yeti staggered backward. Then it grabbed the bear. Actually grabbed it. The giant beast wrapped both arms around the charging predator and hurled it several feet through the snow. The bear rose immediately and attacked again. Claws ripped through thick fur. Blood sprayed across the ice. The Yeti bellowed in rage. It struck the bear with one massive fist. The impact sounded like a gunshot. The battle became a nightmare of claws, teeth, blood, and violence. Neither creature showed any sign of retreat. The polar bear bit deeply into the Yeti's shoulder. The giant creature screamed. Then it seized the bear's neck with both hands. For several horrifying seconds, the two monsters wrestled in the snow. Finally, there was a sickening crack. The polar bear collapsed. and the valley fell silent. The Yeti stood over its fallen opponent, covered in blood. Steam rose from its body in the freezing air. Then it turned its head, and it looked directly at us. Even from 100 yards away, I knew it had seen us. The creature's dark eyes locked onto ours. Nobody moved, nobody breathed. After what felt like an eternity, the Yeti grabbed the dead polar bear and dragged it toward a distant mountain. Only then did we remember how to move. We fled. None of us spoke for nearly an hour. That night, fear settled over our camp like a living thing. Every noise outside the tent made us jump. Every gust of wind sounded like footsteps. I barely slept. Sometime around 3 a.m, I woke to a strange sound. Footsteps, heavy footsteps, circling our camp. My blood turned to ice. The sound continued for several minutes. Then it stopped. I lay motionless until dawn. When sunlight finally arrived, we emerged from our tents. The tracks surrounded our camp. The same enormous footprints. Whatever the creature was, it had visited us during the night, watching, studying, waiting. We immediately decided to head south. The expedition was over. Unfortunately, the Arctic had other plans. A violent blizzard arrived before noon. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. Wind screamed across the landscape. We became separated within minutes. One moment Ethan and Mark were beside me. The next they vanished into the white chaos. I shouted their names, but no answer. The storm swallowed every sound. Panic surged through me. I wandered blindly for hours. The cold became unbearable. My legs felt heavy. Exhaustion clouded my thoughts. Then I saw an opening in the mountainside. A cave. Desperate for shelter, I stumbled inside. The wind disappeared behind me. For several seconds, I simply stood there catching my breath. Then I smelled it. Rot. The stench was overwhelming. I switched on my flashlight. The beam revealed bones. Hundreds of bones. Animal skeletons littered the cave floor. Caribou, Arctic foxes, seals, even polar bears. The farther I moved into the cave, the worse it became. Half-eaten carcasses lay scattered everywhere. Frozen blood stained the rocks. Something lived there. Something enormous. A terrible realization hit me. I wasn't sheltering in a random cave. I had entered the Yeti's home. A deep growl echoed from somewhere in the darkness. My flashlight trembled in my hand. Slowly I turned. Two glowing eyes stared at me. My heart nearly exploded. The Yeti stepped into the light. It was even larger than I remembered. 10 feet tall, perhaps more. Fresh scars covered its body from the battle with the polar bear. Blood still matted parts of its fur. The creature stared at me silently. I couldn't move. Every survival instinct screamed at me to run. But my legs refused to obey. The Yeti took one step forward, then another. The cave floor shook beneath its weight. I expected it to kill me instantly. Instead, it just simply watched, studied, as if deciding what I was. I slowly backed away. The creature followed. My pulse thundered in my ears. Then it roared. The sound was deafening. Dust rained from the ceiling. I turned and sprinted. Behind me came the thunder of massive footsteps. The chase was on. I raced through the twisting tunnels. Flashlight beam bounced wildly. The Yeti crashed after me. Its roars echoed through the darkness. At one point I glanced behind me. The creature was only yards away. Its enormous hand nearly grabbed my backpack. I dove through a narrow passage. The opening was barely wide enough for me. The Yeti slammed into the rock wall behind me. The entire tunnel shook. I crawled frantically through the cramped passage. The creature roared in frustration. Its arms reached into the gap. Massive fingers clawed toward my leg. I kicked desperately and continued crawling. Finally, I emerged onto a steep icy slope outside the mountain. Without hesitation, I slid down. Snow and ice flew everywhere. Behind me came another roar, but the creature could not follow through the narrow opening. I reached the bottom of the slope and ran. And I ran until my lungs burned. I ran until darkness fell. I ran until I found a rescue team searching for missing hikers. Miraculously, Ethan and Mark had also survived the blizzard. They had been found earlier that day. When I told them what happened, neither questioned me. They had seen the creature too. Weeks later, helicopters searched the region, but nothing was found. No tracks, no evidence. Maybe the storm covered those giant tracks. Officially, the Yeti does not exist. Experts dismiss the story. Scientists laugh. Maybe they should. But sometimes, late at night, I remember those eyes staring at me from the darkness of that cave. I remember the mountains of bones. I remember the smell of death. Most of all, I remember the intelligence behind that creature's gaze. It wasn't merely an animal. It understood exactly what I was. And for reasons I'll never understand, it chose to let me leave. Somewhere beyond the frozen horizon of the Arctic, hidden among glaciers and mountains, I believe that giant still walks. Hunting, watching, waiting. I never went back. And whenever the Arctic wind howls outside my window, I can almost hear its distant roar carried across the endless snow.